The restaurant had never seen anything like it. Nadia Ose moved between the white linen tables of Lumiere with the practiced efficiency of someone who had learned to disappear in plain sight. 26 years old, dark eyes that missed nothing, carrying 4 plates without a tray because she had taught herself in the first week that it was faster. She was invisible, the way all good servers were invisible, present enough to anticipate, absent enough not to intrude. Table 7 changed everything. 4 men had been seated for 40 minutes. 3 of them were comfortable in the way that old money was always comfortable, laughing easily, ordering without looking at the prices, treating Nadia the way most guests at Lumiere treated her, which was to say barely treating her at all. The 4th man was different. Marcus Dahl sat at the head of the table with the quiet certainty of a man who had long since stopped needing to announce himself. 42, silver at his temples, a watch on his wrist that cost more than Nadia's yearly rent. He had not looked at her directly once in 40 minutes. She had noticed. She always noticed. She was setting down the soup course when Marcus leaned toward his colleagues, a small smile at the corner of his mouth, and said clearly in Hungarian, "Let's see how she handles this. What would you like, gentlemen? Shall we order in something she won't understand?" His colleague, a broad man named Fletcher, laughed quietly. Marcus looked up at Nadia for the first time. In flawless Hungarian, he said, "I'll begin with the duck, and my colleagues will share the tasting menu. Also, your sommelier should know that the 2017 Barossa they've been pouring is not what the label claims." The table waited. Nadia looked at him calmly. She looked at her notepad. And then, in Hungarian just as clean and accent-correct as his, she said, "The duck is an excellent choice. I'll note your concern about the Barossa and pass it to our head sommelier immediately. Will there be anything else before your mains?" The silence that followed was absolute. Fletcher's mouth was open. The 3rd man, younger, set down his water glass slowly, as if sudden movement might break something. Marcus Dahl stared at Nadia with an expression she had never seen on a man like him before. It was the expression of someone who had thrown a punch and found the wall wasn't there. "You speak Hungarian," he said in English now because the performance was over. "And 6 other languages," Nadia replied, her voice even. "I'll put your order in now." She walked away without waiting for his response, and she did not let herself feel anything about it until she reached the kitchen, where she stood by the pass for 10 seconds with her eyes closed, and then opened them and kept moving, because that was what you did. That was what she had learned to do. You kept moving. She did not expect him to come back. He came back on Tuesday. Alone, smaller table. He had asked for her section. She learned this from Renee at the front desk, who mentioned it with careful neutrality. She approached with her notepad, and Marcus Dahl looked up at her and said in careful, slightly wrong Hungarian, "I owe you an apology." His pronunciation was labored. He had been practicing. Despite everything she understood about men with his kind of money and his kind of confidence, she felt something loosen, very slightly, in her chest. "Your second vowel in asterisk cursor norm is too short," she said. He blinked. "If you're going to apologize in Hungarian," she continued, "you should say it correctly." He repeated it. It was better. "The other night was unnecessary," he said. "I was trying to impress people at your expense. That was unkind, and I'm sorry." Nadia had been waiting tables since she was 22. In that time she had received many things from wealthy guests: dismissal, condescension, occasional cruelty disguised as humor, and once memorably, a €50 note from a man who had knocked red wine onto her uniform and hadn't turned around. She had received in all that time maybe 5 genuine apologies. She recognized the real ones. "Thank you," she said. "What can I get you to drink?" Now, before we go further, if you're watching this story for the first time, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell, because we post stories like this every week, and you won't want to miss where this is going. He came back the Thursday after that. and the Thursday after that. Nadia was not a woman who allowed herself expensive feelings. She had learned that the hard way in the same years that had taught her to carry 4 plates without a tray, to budget for broken boilers, to read a lease agreement without a lawyer because you simply had to. She watched Marcus Dahl the way she watched everything, carefully, looking for the familiar signs, the presumption, the performance of interest that was actually just interest in the novelty of her. The moment when a man like that remembered who he was and stopped. She didn't find those things. What she found was that he was funny in a way he kept mostly to himself, that he'd grown up without much, in a small city that people left rather than arrived at, and that he spoke about it with a kind of flat accuracy rather than the polished mythology that self-made people usually constructed. That he listened when she spoke, really listened, not the kind of listening that was just waiting for your turn. She told him about the languages, that she had studied linguistics at Crestfield University, that she had left before finishing, that she was planning someday to go back. "That's a long time to be carrying something," he said, quietly, at the end of a walk along the harbor that had lasted 2 hours longer than either of them had planned. She thought about that sentence for days. The email came on a Wednesday night, just as Nadia was finishing a late shift. It was from her old university friend, Demi, who now worked at a financial transparency organization and was knee-deep in a report about a 2020 corporate restructuring and its effects on small businesses. Demi wrote carefully, the way journalists wrote when they weren't sure of the reception. "I don't know if this means anything to you, but I kept seeing one company name come up. Kane Meridian Group. I looked them up and noticed Marcus Dahl is the CEO. I don't know if you know him or not, but Nadia, one of the businesses that went under in their supply chain collapse in 2020 was OSI Technical Consulting." Nadia read the email 3 times. Her father's firm. She sat down on the edge of her bed in her small flat with the kitchen light still on, and she did not move for a very long time. Her father, James Osai, had built his consulting firm over 18 years. Small, specialized, respected. He had a handful of clients he'd kept for a decade. A modest office with a coffee machine he was unreasonably proud of, and a habit of calling Nadia every Sunday to ask about her thesis and argue pleasantly about grammar. In 2020, one of his major contracts had been canceled without warning. The firm had tried to survive the loss. The loans had come next. The restructuring. The slow, terrible unwinding. He had a stroke in the spring of 2021. He survived it technically. But the man who came home from the hospital was quieter, slower, more frightened. And the firm was already gone. And Nadia had left Crestfield in the autumn of that year to move home, to manage the finances, to care for him, to raise her younger brother Saul and sister Ya because her mother was drowning and someone had to swim. She had never looked closely at why the contract was canceled. There had been no time to look closely at anything. You just absorbed the blow and kept going because that was the only option. Now she looked. She pulled every document she could find. Demi sent her the full report. She cross-referenced dates. Marcus Dahl's company had executed a major supply chain pivot in early 2020, praised at the time in business coverage as bold, visionary, agile. What the coverage hadn't followed was the downstream effect. Dozens of small contractors, locked into voided agreements, left without recourse. Her father's firm was one of 17 that had folded within the year. Nadia sat with this for 5 days. She went to her shifts. She made Ya's lunch. She helped Saul with his CV. She ran her budget. She read her Latin in the evenings the way she always did when she couldn't sleep, the old grammar lying open on her lap like a hand she trusted. She was not dramatic with her anger. She had learned not to be, but she felt it now, cold and thorough and completely clear, and she had to decide what to do with it. She could disappear. Block his number, request a section transfer, let the whole thing dissolve back into the city. She had disappeared from harder things. She could tell him and watch what happened. She could use it. She had thought briefly and honestly about that option, about the power of what she knew, the leverage, the satisfaction of watching a man like Marcus Dahl understand what indifference cost. She had sat with that thought long enough to look at it properly, and then she had set it aside because it wasn't her. On Saturday evening, she asked him to meet her at the harbor. He was there before her. He was always early, she had noticed. She told him without building to it. She laid it down like evidence because that was what it was: dates, contract names, her father's firm, the stroke, the year she had left Crestfield and not gone back. Marcus did not move while she spoke. He stood completely still, the harbor wind moving around him, and he listened the way she had learned he listened, completely, without interruption, without managing his expression. When she finished, the silence stretched between them. "I didn't know," he said. His voice was steady, but she could hear something underneath it. "I know that probably means very little to you." "It means something," she said. "I just needed to be honest about what it doesn't fix." "What doesn't it fix?" "The year I lost. My father's hands, the way they shake now when he holds a cup." Her voice was even. She had practiced. "The version of myself that I put down in 2021 and haven't fully picked back up." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry," he said. Not quickly, not as a deflection. He said it the way you said something you understood couldn't carry the full weight but was still the truest word available. "I have been building things without looking at what they land on. I don't have a defense for it." "I'm not asking for a defense." "Then what are you asking for?" It was the question she had been sitting with for 5 days. She had turned it over, examined it from every angle, held it up to different kinds of light. "I'm asking for you to hold it," she said, "to know it and not put it down, because I've been carrying it my whole adult life and you've been part of the machinery without knowing it, and I needed that to be known. Between us. I needed to stop pretending it wasn't there." He looked at her for a long moment. The harbor light moved on the water. "And then?" he asked. "And then I don't know," she said, "but I don't think I want to disappear." He nodded slowly. "Neither do I." It was not the end of the difficulty. She would not pretend otherwise, not even to herself. There were weeks where the anger came back up like groundwater, and she had to make the choice again, not once, but again, to set it down without betraying it, to understand that forgiveness was not the same thing as amnesia, that you could acknowledge a wound and still decide not to live inside it. Marcus did not try to buy his way to absolution. She had braced for that, had her response ready. Instead, 6 months later, Demi mentioned, in passing, that a small reparations fund had been quietly established, working with the families of businesses affected by the 2020 restructuring. No press release. No nomming of it anywhere near his profile. Nadia asked him about it. "It doesn't undo anything," he said. "I know that." "I know you know," she said. She sent the email to her old linguistics professor, Dr. Ibarra, on a Tuesday in November. Dr. Ibarra replied in under an hour, at 11:15 at night, beginning with "I have been waiting 4 years for this email," and ending with a list of updated fellowship deadlines, a note about a new graduate position in the comparative linguistics department, and what appeared to be a partially drafted thesis outline that Dr. Ibarra had apparently been maintaining speculatively. "In the faith," she wrote, "that students like you don't disappear, they just get delayed." Nadia read it twice. Then she went to the kitchen and made tea and stood at the window looking at the city for a long time, and let herself feel it fully, the grief and the relief, and the complicated, unruly hope of a door that had been closed for 4 years opening again. She started in the spring semester. She still worked Thursday evenings at Lumiere, because some rhythms once earned were worth keeping. She came to table 7 on the first Thursday in April. It had been hers for a long time now, quietly understood between her and Renee at the front desk, and found a single folded card on the white linen. She opened it. In careful Hungarian, the handwriting precise and practiced, it read, Joe Estate, Nagian Busk Vajiak Rod. Good evening, I am so very proud of you. The vowels were all correct. If this story hit you somewhere real, go ahead and like the video, and drop in the comments what part stayed with you the most. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the perfect time. There are more stories just like this one waiting for you. Nadia folded the card and put it in her apron pocket. She straightened her uniform. She picked up her notepad. She walked to the table. She had 7 languages, a spring semester ahead of her, a father who still called every Sunday to argue about grammar, a brother who was managing his own life at last, and a sister who had just sold her first piece of graphic work to a magazine and called Nadia at midnight, crying in the good way. She had set down a weight she had been carrying since she was 22. She had not set down herself. That she had come to understand was the whole point, not the fall, not the recovery, not even the love story threading through it, though that was real and she had stopped pretending otherwise. The point was the thing her father had said when she was 7, with his hand on the top of her head. You are the smartest person I have ever known. Don't let anything take that from you. Nothing had. It had just taken a little longer than planned.